From beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, it is a Neglected News Report. I'm your co-host, Scott Mitchell, along with my brother, Kevin.
Good afternoon.
And it's been a long time, guys. We took the summer off, at least two-thirds of the summer off.
Don't comment on the sound file.
I don't know what's wrong with that. It does that on certain songs for some reason. It always does it on this. It also does it when I DJ on my, what do you call it, my intro theme that I use. I don't know why it does that. I just haven't been able to figure that out, why it does that. Anyway, guys, yeah, it's we just took some time off. It just sometimes during the summer it just gets too darn busy.
Yeah, the heat of the summer, the driving, that I do so much, during all year round, but in the summer it really starts taking its toll. Mm-hmm. And to throw an extra curveball into it, we've had a shooter on the loose these last few weeks.
On I-10.
I-10, I-17, all the freeway systems. 51 the other day.
I'll tell you what, we're going to see, 2 weeks from Monday, we're going to see Van Halen, and our friends of ours are going with us, and we're renting a limo. I'm going to tell them to take surface streets. I don't want to be on the freeway, unless I catch them.
Well, they arrested somebody yesterday.
Yeah, I know, a person of interest.
Yeah, they're taking pot shots, different caliber weapons, though.
That's why they think there's more than one person.
Yeah, and it seems that they were not in a set position, but actually going the opposite direction in a moving vehicle with
really?
Assault.
I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, the ballistics guys. Cops have ways of figuring that out.
No one's been killed yet.
And assault weapon style, 7.62, 5.56 millimeter rounds.
Well, the fact that no one's been killed yet would lend credence to that theory.
What the cops? Yeah, exactly. The cops said it's a pretty difficult task trying to hit your target, while you're going 60, 70 miles an hour. So,
yeah, true.
So anyway, hopefully we get that guy because I hit it. Yeah, well,
it's probably some pissed off feminists.
Oh, we'll get into one of those later,
or a group of them.
Oh boy, yeah. If you looked like half of them, you'd be angry too.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Well, yesterday was 9/11. The 14th anniversary. Scott, I don't know about you, but I don't get all warm and fuzzy and patriotic anymore on 9/11.
I've been thinking the same exact thing. I was thinking yesterday, it's like, okay, I'm watching as I'm getting ready for work. I got done watching the TV show I was watching, so for the remaining 10 or 15 minutes while I was getting ready, I was watching Fox News, and they're going through the traditional reading of the names at the Ground Zero Memorial, and it's like, okay, I can understand the people there want to hear it because a lot of them are relatives and loved ones of the people who were killed. But do you have to show the whole thing on the TV, on the news, and analyze it from every angle like you do with everything? Granted, it's a 24-hour news cycle now, but come on, guys.
Well, you got to stir up the patriotism in order for the American people to accept the crap sandwich we've been fed in so many different ways for the past 14 years in the form of our civil liberties being taken away from us and the senseless wars we seem to be fighting all the time.
Yeah, Kevin's got a lot on this, but I'm going to real quick read a little intro to an article I found that I think kind of sums it all up. On so many levels. It's from Breitbart from yesterday by Ben Shapiro, who, by the way, if you've never heard of him or read him or seen him, read his stuff. He's 31 years old. This guy's got it together for a young kid. He's on Fox a lot. He writes for Breitbart.
He's on Dennis Prager's radio show quite a bit also. He's out of L.A.
Okay, the article's called For Obama and the Left, Never Forget His BS. Today, everyone in the media will repeat never forget regarding September 11th. The President of the United States tweeted, 14 years after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, we honor those we lost. We salute all who served to keep us safe. We stand as strong as ever. Every year, America substitutes counterfeit unity for the unity that temporarily united us on 9/11. We wave flags, our politicians blather, and our media members dab at their eyes. We remember where we were when 9/11 happened, but for a large percentage of the country, never forget is BS. Not the feelings of horror, of course. We all remember those, but never forget means more than remembering collapsing towers and Americans choosing to die by leaping from 1,000 feet rather than burning to death. It means more than welling up when we hear God bless America. Never forget means never forgetting what, how, who, and why. We've remembered the what. We're actively fostering the how, funding the who, and ignoring the why. And that's the whole key to it right there. We forget why it happened, or no one's ever been truthful about why it happened.
Well, I find that the younger people tend to be much more objective about what possibly went down on 9/11, only because they really don't remember a world before 9/11. They don't. Scott and I grew up. I'll be 54 here in a few weeks. Scott's 56. We grew up in a time when America was the shining city on the hill.
I think a lot of it has to do with our generation.
We have a hard time giving it up, though. Is what
I think it's because of nationalism.
Well, no, we
to a large degree.
You and I think clearly. I'm not saying that.
Right, but I think a lot of people, it's because of nationalism.
Nationalism and a memory of when there was a time when we felt that we were doing good throughout the world. And I think people get the feeling we're not necessarily doing so much good, throughout the world. We're creating a whole lot of problems. So 2 things really happened after 9/11 that affected us dramatically. This article is this is from Zero Hedge, and if you all get a chance, read zerohedge.com. It's predominantly an economic website. It dabbles a lot. Sometimes it gets in the weeds with numbers and graphs and so forth, but every once in a while they'll talk about current events. And this particular one was posted yesterday. It was called, this guy, he calls himself Tyler Durden, which is really a Brad Pitt character. In what movie was that? Was that 13 Monkeys? Was that Tyler Durden?
12 Monkeys?
12 Monkeys. Was that Tyler Durden?
It might have been. I don't remember now.
Anyway.
No, I don't think it was.
The article is titled, Remembering 9/11, the Wolf and Patriot Act, Sheep's Clothing. So he starts the article off. I won't go into detail about, where he was in his life at that particular time. And he goes on, he starts out by saying, right after 9/11, 45 days after 9/11, Bush signed into law the U.S. Patriot Act. 45 days. Man, that ain't a lot of time, is it, Scott?
Nope.
That kind of makes you wonder, you think maybe they had the Patriot Act written before 9/11?
And on top of that, do you think they had Obamacare written before they introduced it, before he was even president?
All these things I'm going to talk about today are reasons why you have truthers out there, why people are suspicious about the government explanation behind 9/11. So, the Patriot Act was signed into law. The implication of the ironically titled bill is well described by a report published in March of 2009 by the ACLU, which I'm not a big fan of, but in this case, I agree with them.
Every so often, they get it right.
Yeah, the report called Reclaiming Patriotism suggests that the Patriot Act fundamentally altered the relationship Americans share with their government. Politicians took advantage of a moment of extreme duress for the American people to push through a bill that not only breached the spirit of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, but also directly contradicts the rights guaranteed under the First and Fourth Amendments. In case you don't know, First Amendment is freedom of
religion, speech, press, and free assembly.
Free assembly. And fourth is search and seizure. The Patriot Act gave powers to the executive branch of our government. It was never meant to have. Such restriction of powers was mandated by the Founding Fathers through the legal framework of which this nation is governed, a legal framework of which each legislator is sworn to uphold upon taking office. The ACLU's 2009 report provides an interesting and unintended perspective of the fundamental dangers of the Patriot Act because it was published prior to revelations made by NSA security agents contractor Edward Snowden. Note the following excerpt from ACLU report. This is the ACLU talking about the Patriot Act. Worse, it authorizes the government to engage in this expanded domestic spying in secret with few, if any, protections built in to ensure these powers are not abused and little opportunity for Congress to review whether the authorities it granted the government actually made Americans any safer. So basically the Patriot Act, and I'm going to read more on this, but the Patriot Act really paved the way for things like the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act.
They got that big data collection site in Nevada or Utah or wherever it's at.
Which suspends, among other things, your Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. Not habeas corpus, but when you have trial, speedy trial, what do you got? Okay. Under NDAA, you can be arrested, thrown in jail without trial. What's the word I'm looking for? When you don't, your right to a free trial is your. I'm drawing a blank.
I'm drawing a blank too.
But anyway, the Patriot Act was a precursor to the things like the NDAA, which is just the Patriot Act.
Talking about your Miranda rights?
No, your due process.
Due process, that's it, yeah.
It was that simple. Your due process. There is no due process. NDAA, those are police state tactics. Mm-hmm. And Patriot Act paved the way for that, and all the NDAA is that on steroids. Because
all these things that were passed, they preyed upon people's desire to be secure.
And
security.
What did Ben Franklin say?
Anyone who is willing to sacrifice a little liberty for a little bit of security deserves neither.
And the fact that was over 200 years ago, that was said over 200 years ago, is irrelevant.
Almost 250.
Because human history repeats and repeats and it repeats itself, and human nature is human nature, and power is people in power have proven thousands of years through history to do this, to exercise abuses time and time again.
It's like the Bible says, nothing's new under the sun.
No, yeah, exactly. So he goes on to say that basically, you said that the Patriot Act was a Pandora's box against the rights and freedoms of the American people, and I'd have to agree. I mean, what happened after the Patriot Act was signed into law? We get groped at the airport now.
Yep.
You get groped at at baseball games.
And here's the interesting thing. They could have told the airlines were doing security prior to that, right?
Yes.
Why didn't they tell the airlines, increase your security, your pre-flight security and everything? No, they had to get involved with it.
Because they were building an infrastructure.
Yep. Same thing with healthcare. That's no coincidence that these two things are coming into being in the last 15 years. It's no coincidence.
This is why, people are. That's why there are conspiracy theories, because people connect dots is what they do.
Things don't add up, and people start connecting dots.
So he finishes the argument. The claims of these programs are unlawful are not simply layman opinion. Several courts across the nation have heard various cases and determined that many aspects of the programs are in breach of the Constitution, yet no one has been prosecuted, and the programs under the Patriot Act not only continue but are expanding. Mm-hmm. History and common sense tells us that those in power will always attempt to beget more power. Several independent studies prove that these programs have very little impact on protecting Americans from terrorism, while the Snowden leaks provide evidence and that wide abuses have been taking place for political motivations. The Patriot Act has become the enemy it claims necessitates its existence. The irony. It is the most prolific form of terrorism against American citizenry and many of our allies today. The argument so often touted by the beneficiaries of the Patriot Act is that trading freedom for safety is an acceptable trade, unless you're talking to Ben Franklin. Mm-hmm. That argument is not only invalid, it is unsound. Freedom and safety are not mutually exclusive, and even if they were, the slippery slope aspect of such way of thinking makes it a false proposition. If you haven't done so, you must fully examine the Snowden revelations to comprehend the extent of the tyranny authorized and enacted by the Patriot Act and its subsidiary acts. Let me bring this to a sharp point for any who have failed to feel it. A terrible thing happened to this nation on 9/11 that none of us expected ever would. We felt vulnerable, and maybe for the first time within the borders of our nation, the strongest nation on this earth, it changed many of us in very profound ways. At that point, in that moment, all we wanted to feel is that it would and that it could never happen again. And so we entrusted our leaders to work together on implementing policies that would ensure freedom to be safe from those who want to take it from us. The Patriot Act was sold to Americans as a shield to defend our freedom, that it was to ensure our rights as guaranteed by our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and would be safe from evildoers. However, the sad reality is that our leaders took our moment of need as an opportunity to further enhance the powers of the state over the powers of the people. So that's what happened. There's one thing that happened after 9/11 that, that's why people talk about false flags. Now, through history, Scott, give me an example of a false flag. The Reichstag.
Yeah, the Reichstag. Sorry, we were talking about that before we came on the air, too. Yeah, the Reichstag was, the burning of the Reichstag was just a false flag, so that, what happened right after that? Hitler went in, had all the communists killed, and seized power.
He blamed the communists.
He blamed the communists and used that as a reason to kill them all.
He consolidated, took power, consolidated it, and then proceeded to do things like confiscated guns.
Yeah, exactly.
He used it as an excuse. So what's happened since 9/11? Have we gained or have we lost freedoms?
Now,
I'm afraid we've lost many of them.
And most people don't realize that they have. One freedom we lost that I've was talking to Kevin about before we went on the air is basically private property. Well, you would say, to a large degree, you would say, well, wait, I've still got my car, I've got all my belongings, I've got my home, but one thing you don't have is your buying power. That's private property. Here's what I mean. What has happened in spades, and by the way, that's not a racist comment, in spades since 9/11. What has happened? Prices have gone up, skyrocketed. Gasoline's gone up, skyrocketed. And wages have stayed the same or gone down in a lot of cases. People have lost jobs. When prices go up and your wages don't go up commensurate with them, you lose buying power. You cannot buy the things you want. You cannot take the vacation when you want. You can't go driving around to different things as much as you want.
Not only
everything.
That, prices have gone up because we've been printing dollars.
Well, that's part of it too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've been printing dollars to fight wars, which are a byproduct of 9/11, which I'll get into on this next article. But so much of our buying power has decreased because of inflation. Inflation because the dollar, we're printing dollars, and therefore it's worth less and less and less. What did they say when the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913? The dollar could buy a dollar's worth of goods. Mm-hmm. Today it buys 3 cents.
I mean, as an example, they were Thursday we had our quarter. I work IT. And every quarter we have an IT-wide, and I work for a large company. Our IT department is huge. It's in multiple states, and it's huge. And we have what we call an IT chat with the VP that's over the IT. And what they did was each speaker went up to give his spiel on whatever he was talking about, they recognized all the anniversaries in the company, 5, 10, 15, 20... or 5, 10, 20, 25, 30, 35, all the way up to 40 years with the company. And they were giving some facts about things, what the price of things were in the particular year and all that. Like, so when they got to people who have been with the company for 40 years, the vice president of the company, he says, back in 1975, gasoline was 44 cents a gallon. And I remember that because I used to deliver pizzas back then, and I know what the price of gasoline was. I can remember when we were kids.
30 cents.
30 cents. Dad would put in what? He'd say to the guy at the pump, that's back in the days when it was full service, he'd say $3. $3 of high test.
Get you 9 gallons.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe 10.
And why is that so, folks? A lot of it has to do with the fact that the value of the dollar's gone down. And what currency is oil traded in? U.S. dollars. Yep. It's the standard.
Yeah, and it's
the reserve currency, as they call it.
Yeah. Well, this next article is going to address another thing that it's indirectly going to address another big change that occurred after 9/11 to America, and I'll explain it as afterwards. This is written by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, who was an assistant to David Stockman, who was Ronald Reagan's was he Secretary of the Treasury?
No, he wasn't. He was his
chief financial
advisor or something.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Paul Craig Roberts is an economist, and he's been coming out a lot criticizing the wars that we're fighting, the saber rattling, the economy, this fake economy that we have, which we'll talk about if we have time. So anyway, he's wrote this article from the perspective of the government's explanation of 9/11 actually being the conspiracy theory instead of truthers. The truthers are considered conspiratorials, the conspiracy theorists, when in fact Paul Craig Roberts says the government is the one really peddling the conspiracy theories. So he says the account below of the government's 9/11 conspiracy theory reads like a parody, and it does if you listen to it, but in fact is an accurate summary of the official 9/11 conspiracy theory. Okay, the official version of 9/11 goes something like this. Directed by a beardy guy from a cave in Afghanistan, 19 hard-drinking, coke-snorting, devout Muslims enjoy lap dances before their mission to meet Allah. Using nothing more than craft knives, they overpower cabin crew, passengers, and pilots on 4 planes. And hangover or not, they manage to give the world's most sophisticated air defense system the slip. Unfazed by leaving their how to fly a jet guide in the car at the airport, they master the controls in no time and score direct hits on 2 towers, causing three to collapse completely. The laws of physics fail, and the world watches in awe as asymmetrical damage and scattered low-temperature fires cause steel frame buildings to collapse symmetrically through their own mass at free-fall speed for the first time in history. Despite this dastardly cunning and superb planning, they give their identity away by using explosive-proof passports which survive the destruction of steel and concrete and fall to the ground, where they are quickly discovered lying on top of the massive debris. Think about that for a second. Meanwhile, in Washington, Henny Hanger, having previously flunked Cessna flying school, gets carried away with all the successes of the day and suddenly finds incredible abilities behind the controls of a jet airliner. Instead of flying straight down into the large roof area of the Pentagon, he decides to show off a little. Execute an incredible 270-degree downward spiral, he levels off to hit the low facade of the Pentagon, without ruining the nicely mowed lawn and at a speed just too fast to capture on video. In the skies, meanwhile, in the skies above Pennsylvania, desperate to talk to loved ones before their death, some passengers use sheer willpower to collect mobile calls that would not be possible until several years later. And following a heroic attempt by some to retake control of Flight 93, the airliner crashes into a Pennsylvania field, leaving no trace of engines, fuselage, or occupants, except for the standard-issued Muslim terrorist bandana.
There's 2 things about United 93 that have always bothered me. The fact that there was nothing found, or very little, if any, debris. And this has bothered me about all 3 planes. Honestly, 2 terrorists on each plane with nothing but box cutters. You couldn't overwhelm them. Everyone was so deathly afraid.
And by the way, they were very slight of build as well. I would have, I'm about 6'2", 220. I would have manhandled them with box cutter or not.
I mean, come on. You couldn't take like a piece of overhead luggage and use that as a weapon against them and subdue them? That's kind of always bothered me.
So
there had to be something else involved that has never been reported.
It says, during these events, President Bush continues to read My Pet Goat to a class of primary school children. Meanwhile, in New York, World Trade Center leaseholder Larry, we can spend a whole show doing this, by the way. The World Trade Center leaseholder Larry Silverstein blesses his own foresight in ensuring the buildings against terror attack only 6 weeks previously. Okay, in the real world, if you took out fire insurance on your house 6 weeks before it burnt down, I think they'd be investigating that, don't you?
Yeah.
I think if you took a life insurance policy out on your wife 2 weeks before she was murdered, I think they'd be investigating that.
No, no, let me qualify.
Let me just finish.
Go ahead.
And this is its last little bit. In Washington, the neoconservatives are overjoyed by the arrival of the new Pearl Harbor, the necessary catalyst for launching their pre-planned wars.
Now, I'm not saying I'm a 9/11 truther, because then I'd be as crazy as Rosie O'Donnell. But I've always been certain things about it that have just kind of bothered me, and some of those things are brought up, are in my opinion, things worthy of investigation. I mean, there's just some things that just bother me.
The fact that you're called crazy, that's what they used to do in the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany when you would speak out against the official government narrative.
I mean,
you'll call you crazy, even throw you in the loony bin, maybe give you a lobotomy, maybe dope you up on drugs the rest of your life, but they don't tolerate it very well.
I mean, in light of everything that's happened in the last 14 years, is it really so hard to take a leap and believe that it may not be all in the up and up about 9/11?
Well, I don't call myself a truther, only because I'm just going down that rabbit hole, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Listen to the first time I even heard that there was even a conspiracy at all was, I would say in 2007. That's 6 years after 9/11. I'm sitting in a Mexican restaurant with a bunch of friends. One of them included this big Canadian dude named Irwin was his name, I remember. I don't know how the subject came up, but he said, "Yeah, man, didn't you know that your government planned 9/11?" And I said, "What? Never heard that before." I'm like, "What are you, nuts?" And I got angry. I said, "How dare you?" And the fact that he was a Canadian even made me more angry.
I was thinking the same thing.
And I said, "How dare you?" So you're accusing of our president of being a mass murderer. And he said, "Well, if you want to put it that way, but your government planned it." And I just got and this lady that was sitting the next table over took her elbow and jabbed me in the back. And I turned around and she looked at me. She says, "You know, your friend's right." And I'm like, I dropped my fork on the, threw my hands up in exasperation, and I'm saying, "Are you all nuts? Are you nuts?" And that was in 2007, and that was the first time I ever heard about it. But as time goes by, all these revelations, there are literally documentaries out there by engineers who build skyscrapers for a living and pilots who fly planes for a living that totally discount everything that's been told about 9/11. But here's what I can tell you has happened since then. We've lost our rights, and we're fighting nonstop wars. We've been fighting nonstop wars for 14 years. You know what's come out of Afghanistan? Heroin.
Yep.
That's about it. Have you noticed how much more heroin's out on the street?
Yep.
After 9/11?
Because it's cheap. And
they
why
grow
is it cheap?
Poppies.
Why is it cheap? Because production's gone up.
Listen to this. This was weird.
That's why.
I watched an interview the other day with a woman, a whistleblower from the IMF, International Monetary Fund.
Right.
And she's an American. And she's been screaming at the top of her lungs for years that something ain't right in Kansas. We ain't in Kansas anymore. Something ain't right in wherever. I screwed that one up. But
something's rotten in Denmark.
Yeah, there we go. That was Hamlet. That's Hamlet.
Shakespeare, yeah.
I should have known that. I feel stupid now. But anyway, you know what she said? She, among other things, she started talking about. She was surprised. She went in there to debunk a lot of the assertions. She was a lawyer. She went in to debunk a lot of the whisperings that there was corruption in the IMF, only to find out that there was, and there was a lot of it. But anyway, one thing she said, and I always knew, I had heard this about the Federal Reserve and where our tax money goes to. She said to the interviewer, she said, "You know where our income tax money goes to?" And he said, "To build bridges and roads." She says, "No." She says, "Those are done through, other tax, revenue, like sales tax and real estate tax and gas tax, all sorts of things." She said, "No, you want to know where your tax money goes that you pay your income taxes with?" She said 40% of it goes to the Federal Reserve, which are nothing but a bunch of private bankers. Okay? 40%. So that leaves 60%. if 60% doesn't go into, the Treasury, where does it go? You know what she said? And I still am shocked. And she gave no explanation. She said 60% of it goes to the Vatican.
Really? That I didn't know.
The Vatican. And, the Vatican has a bank. It's one of the biggest banks in the world. But, so, that shocked me. And I know why this ties into the Afghanistan and the heroin. She said, where the government gets a lot of its money from? Drug trade.
That doesn't surprise me. Remember that article a few months ago it was on the private prisons?
Oh, yeah, that's big money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been following that for the last couple of years.
Oh, by the way, Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt's character in Fight Club.
Oh, Fight Club. There we go. I know his.
I forgot about it. He was the narrator. He was the narrator and the character both. Him and what's his name? Ed Norton. Ed Norton.
Ed Norton was really good in that.
It was an interesting movie.
Yeah.
I forget who the
Apparently, there's an underlying theme that no one typically gets.
Helena Bonham Carter was the female lead.
I want to watch it again because it's been years since I watched it. And I just kind of looked at it for its violence and so forth. But apparently, there's a real underlying message there that most people
miss. There have been episodes of TV shows that have kind of picked up that theme in the past.
So anyway, tying this all together about 9/11, why I don't feel patriotic when we celebrate this, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it's a holiday or what do you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But the reason I don't is because what good has happened since then? None.
Mm-hmm.
We've got never-ending wars, and we've got less and less rights. And we have a law that's just kind of sitting there like a caged pit bull in the corner waiting to be unlocked in the NDAA. Mm-hmm. That could be used against every one of us.
Yep. I should have read this earlier before we got into this. The Ben Shapiro article still.
Uh-huh.
He goes through the what, the how, and the why of 9/11, and the why is that thing that people don't talk about a lot.
And that's what we're talking about.
Right. I know. But this is what he has to say, and I think that the truth is in the middle somewhere. But this is what he has to say. He says, "We did not deserve 9/11. Al-Qaeda targeted America, according to Osama bin Laden's own writings, because of our support for Israel, our attempts to stop warlords from murdering innocents in Somalia, our support for the Indian regime over Pakistani terrorism in Kashmir, our opposition to terrorist group Hezbollah in Lebanon, our opposition to Sharia law governments, and our placement of military bases in the Middle East to prevent aggression by Saddam Hussein." I'll go along with that. Okay? Bin Laden suggested that in order to avoid future attacks, the United States would have to convert to Islam, renounce all sexually immoral acts under Islamic definition, and give up our laws in favor of Sharia.
Does that include going to topless bars like his 19 guys supposedly did the night before? But I don't believe that.
In other words, we were attacked for doing good things and standing for basic principles of liberty. Support for Israel is morally good. Opposing Hezbollah and Hamas and Somali warlords and Pakistani terror groups is morally good. Not abiding by Sharia law is morally good. The American left does not believe that we deserve 9/11 because of our support for homosexuality or think that we should embrace Sharia law, of course. But they do believe that America has been a general force for evil in the world, and that the real Islamist complaint springs from poverty and American injustice causing it. That's what the left does believe. I've heard that so many times. Fundamentally, a large wing of Americans believe that America deserved 9/11, and that wing has a major influence on the Democratic Party in particular. Barack Obama sat in Jeremiah, "America's chickens are coming home to roost," rights church for 20 years, then shrugged it off in a pathetically self-serving speech. Newly crowned king of leftist race theory, Ta-Nehisi Coates, has written in his book about getting high while watching 9/11 occur from the top of his apartment building and feeling nothing at all. President Obama spent his early presidency telling the Islamic world that America had been arrogant, and wrote in his book that the desperation and disorder of the powerless creates terrorism. The solution? giving the powerless power, and that has been President Obama's mission, which incidentally was the mission of those who celebrated 9/11. Perhaps Obama believes that given power, such believers in evil will change their ways. They won't. This is, and that includes domestically too, I might add. This is an impact. There is an impact to forgetting the how, the who, and the why of 9/11. More death, more destruction, more 9/11s. So today, when the media and our politicians put their somber faces on their somber faces and show the images of collapsing towers, understand that those tears mask a mentality that will bring about future 9/11s. The sincerity of their grief isn't in question. The sincerity of never forget certainly is. And I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle. All of it is. I think the reason why we were attacked was everything he stated there, but I think our government knew about it in advance and took advantage of it to foster their agenda.
You need to read more stuff because
okay.
There's just so much wrong with the logistics that happened that day. I mean,
I'm not saying there wasn't.
And there's good. I mean, we're not talking wild-eyed lunatics out there. We're talking respected people in their field that are saying this can't happen. They interviewed firemen that said the steel was flowing like lava coming out of a volcano. You can't do that with jet fuel. And by the way, a building when it falls forward, it doesn't just collapse like that. Yeah. It collapses that way when there's an explosion, which many people heard, by the way. And building number 7 was never even hit. It fell.
You're treading into Rosie O'Donnell territory.
Well, I mean, it's still uncomfortable. I would never have said this years ago, but I can't help it because look at all the other things that have happened since then that perfectly planned.
I honestly think that the hijackers intentionally. I honestly think they flew them into the planes. We saw it. Okay, at least into the World Trade Center, but
we don't know that those were terrorists that flew those planes.
Well, someone did.
Oh, those were flown in there.
But I think our government may have been complicit in making sure that they got the desired result.
Let me ask you, do you think we had drone technology back then? You think we could have flown something remotely?
I honestly think you got a good point. I think we do because I believe that when it comes to technology, the government's 25 years ahead of the private sector. How well? Now, here's the thing. Okay, as an example. Everyone lauds the space program because it's created a lot of innovations that have trickled down to the private sector. How the heck do you think they developed a lot of that stuff so quickly that we were able to put a man on the moon in less than 10 years from the time that John Kennedy said we would by the end of the next decade?
UFOs?
No. We had it in the works already.
Well, that's what they say Area 51 is. They say that. Well, I mean, you talk about cloaked. What do you call the B-1 bomber? The stealth. Well, it's cloaked stealth, whatever.
Yeah,
that stuff.
Cloaked is Star
Trek. They say that stuff was many, many, many years old before it.
I honestly believe the government's got a cure for cancer and a cure for AIDS.
Well, I think the powers that be, are occultists in the sense that they hide a lot of things.
And that's defined in the word occult as
it means hidden.
It means hidden, yes.
Hidden knowledge and so forth. And they keep the knowledge away from the common people because it gives them power and keeps us. I believe if the government ever wanted to, if there was ever a civil war and the government wanted to subdue the people, they would do it in ways that might not even involve one shot being fired. Nope. They've got things that that deal with frequencies that can give you a heart attack, things like all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I've come so far in my thinking. Some people might think I've actually gone crazy since 9/11, but there's too many unanswered questions.
Yeah.
Where we find ourselves at this point in time, and I think it's a takedown. I think it's a big takedown. I think it has hurt our economy drastically since 9/11. I mean, that we should have actually gone under in 2008. As a matter of fact, who was saying this the other day? A really well-known economist. No, it was actually George Soros. Oh boy, George Soros said that the world economy actually died in 2008. but it's been on life support since then, and we really don't have. There really isn't an economy.
Why do you think rich people like him, I mean the super rich, are purchasing secret
redoubts,
armored
redoubts
in remote corners of the world? New Zealand in particular.
New Zealand's a hot spot.
Yep.
The places in the Ozarks also.
They want to flee there when the crap hits the fan, because they know that they'll be the first people that people go after.
They also reopened what's the military underground place up in Colorado?
Mount. I forget.
Yeah, that's what happens when you ad lib stuff.
It's where the Strategic Air Command is.
Yeah, they reopened that and.
Hang on.
That whole area. You know, a lot of people think Denver's going to be. They say it might be the new capital of the United States if something ever happens to Washington.
And a lot of sci-fi books pick Denver also.
Go look at the artwork at DIA. We've gone over this many times. Go look at how dreadful that stuff is. Predicting Holocaust and so forth. You know, folks, all you really need to do is open your eyes and just pay attention. I went through the DIA when it first opened in the mid-'90s, and I'm walking by and I'm looking at this artwork, and there's a guy with an AK-47 and a this is artwork on the walls, and a gas mask with a dead baby next to him, and I'm like, what's this stuff? And of course, the Masons were actually dedicated the site, at the cornerstone. Did you find that?
No, I'm having some trouble with my computer on the network. I don't know what the heck is going on with it.
Well, I'm going to move on to this next thing about sort of economic news. This article's entitled "Don't Fret About the Data. China's GDP forecast to be good news." China's economic data for September will not be collated until early next month, but the ruling Chinese Communist Party has already decided they will bring cheering news. This is in quotes, the focus for the month of September will be strengthening economic propaganda and promoting the discourse on China's bright economic future and the superiority of China's system, the party's propaganda department said in a directive to national media outlets. That bright future is a picture that has been clouded by bleak economic data points and plunging shares in recent months. Turmoil in China, exacerbated by last month's currency devaluation, unleashed a global stock market rout. And I'm not going to go on anymore, but what does that sound like? Our media does the same thing. It throws out its own share of propaganda. For instance, how long have we been hearing about the recovering economy? You know how it's just revving up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can feel it. Cheyenne Mountain.
Cheyenne Mountain. There we go.
That's it.
In Denver, it's reopened. So anyway, we're past that now.
Sorry. Colorado Springs.
Yeah, which is I don't know that. Yeah. Anyway, so we've been told that there's a recovering economy, that everything's rocking and rolling, and that gas prices are down. Gas prices are down because oil's way down. Oil's way down because there's no demand for it because the economy has actually slowed. So we're told that the economy's recovering, even though it's now 94 million Americans are no longer counted as even looking for work anymore.
That's nearly a third of the population.
We got 320 million people, 94 million of them that are not only not working, but are considered outside of the economy and probably living on some sort of government subsidy. So, but we're told all this. This is what's similar. You look what the Chinese Communist government's telling its people, and telling the world, we're doing, everything's perfect and blah, 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 when in fact it's not. Just look at the data. Here's, and another thing is our retail sales and our GDP. Remember, every quarter they come out and say, the GDP, rose this quarter to blah, 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 and retail sales improved to this, blah, 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 only to find out a few weeks later that they had to revise the figures downward. And it's always downward. It's never revised upward. It's always downward because they need to get that media plug in. They need to remind us and tell us how good we really have it, although we all know that we don't. We have less buying power. We have less money left over. We have more stress. We have more divorces. We have more foreclosures. We have more unemployed. Everything. There's more people on federal assistance than ever, and yet we have to be told every day how good it is. Kind of like a good little communist society, if you ask me, because it's similar to what I just read you about in this from the Financial Times about China's GDP forecast.
And have you noticed that all the things that are since 9/11? I honestly think that 9/11. Yeah, do you remember at the time Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson were saying it's judgment, God's judgment on America?
Yeah.
I don't consider it God's judgment because I'll tell you what, if God was going to judge America, it would be a heck of a lot fiercer. I think it's a wake-up call. It's another wake-up call. And if you've noticed that every bad thing that can happen in this country since 9/11, everything that's bad has increased exponentially over the last 14 years. Like, okay, we've become a harsher society. We've become less loving. I mean, you go to in the Bible, and you know what, folks? If you don't like what we're going to say when it comes to the Bible, I could care less. There's a lot of truth in it. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the love chapter where it says love is kind, love is everything. Everything that it says love is in that chapter, we've gone 180 degrees opposite of it. Like love is love. It keeps no accounts of evil. We always keep accounts of evil now. Someone's wronged me, doggone it, I'm going to take them to court. I'm going to destroy them. Case in point, the couple that owned the bakery, where is it, in Oregon, Washington, whatever, they wouldn't bake a cake for a gay wedding. What happened? The gay couple took them to court. These people are on the hook for over $100,000 in fines because of that. They ruined them. They wanted to ruin them.
Yeah, getting back to what your basic premise is, if you read Jonathan Cahn's the Harbinger, he basically says that 9/11 was not God's judgment. Probably it was more of a warning sign, and that and unless we repented and turned away from our ways, then His judgment would come. But instead of repenting, we doubled down.
Because why? Because when 9/11 happened, instead of turning to God and saying, help us, we said, no, we're going to help ourselves. We're going to build ourselves bigger, better, and stronger. The children of Israel did the same darn thing.
And guess
what happened to them?
2,000 years wandering.
Exactly. And why do I make the parallel between them and us? America has always been referred to as the New Jerusalem, the New Israel. We have for that. And all of you people that say separation of church and state, shut up. Close your pie hole.
Let me ask you this question. When Israel was cast out of its land 2,000 years ago and they roamed the world for 2,000 years, they weren't liked by anybody, basically.
No.
What do you think if the same thing happened to us and we had to roam the world? How do you think the rest of the world would treat us?
They don't like us already.
Oh, we would be a pariah. Jew would be the same as American.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting how those societies that hate us link us together with the Jews.
Well, we've been fighting. We've been doing some bad things out there with these wars. I'm sorry about that. But
we brought a lot of this upon ourselves. There's no doubt about it. I have no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind about it. But I mean, sorry, I'm not going to apologize. If you don't want to hear this, then turn us off. You don't have to listen. Yeah. I don't care if you start screaming, shouting from the rafters, separation of church and state. That's a discussion for another day. Because guess what? It's not even the Constitution. It's a big fallacy, and we can prove it with documentation. Anyway, but it's true. This country was founded on Christian values. The founding fathers were Christian. You read their writings, and you cannot come to any other conclusion but that. Okay, you'll make the comments, well, they're slaveholders. Yeah, they're not perfect. But there are legitimate reasons why they didn't take care of slavery when they wrote the Constitution.
By the way,
a lot of reasons.
Slavery is a human condition that's been around forever, and we'll probably...
It's not to endorse it. or condone it. No,
but these critics make it seem like America's the only country that ever practiced slavery.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, heck, African tribes practice slavery with other African tribes.
Well, who do you think sold the people into slavery was their own people?
Yep.
Africans.
Yep.
Typically northern Africans selling sub-Saharan Africans.
Because northern Africans were more sophisticated for the most part.
They were Arabs.
And well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you can say whatever you want. We can find something historically to show that you're wrong.
Okay, this next article. Let's file this one under the absurd.
Yes.
And it would be funny if this woman wasn't serious. It wasn't so serious.
She's 100% serious.
It's the title of the article is Guardian columnist. She works for the Guardian, an English newspaper. Julie Bindell says, "Put all males in some kind of camp." England's most influential radical feminist was asked whether she believes heterosexuality will survive women's liberation. She said, "It won't, not unless men get their act together, have their power taken from them, and behave themselves." I mean, I would actually put them in some kind of camp where they can all drive around in quad bikes or bicycles or white vans. I would give them a choice of vehicles to drive around with, give them no porn, they wouldn't be able to fight, we would have wardens, of course. Women who want to see their sons or male loved ones would be able to go and visit or take them out like a library book and then bring them back. I hope heterosexuality doesn't survive, actually. I would like to see a truce on heterosexuality. I would like an amnesty on heterosexuality until we have sorted ourselves out, because under patriarchy, she goes on to say, it's shit. And I am sick of hearing from individual women that their men are all right. Those men have been shored up by the advantages of patriarchy, and they are all complacent. They are not stopping other men from being shit. Basically, this is all communist dialectic.
And she uses that word repeatedly because she's British.
I would love to see a woman's liberation that results in women turning away from men and saying, when you come back as human beings, then we might look at again. And of course, they're lesbians. They have no use for men. Blendell's suggestion of rounding up males in some kind of camp drew harsh attention for men's rights activists. Blah, 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 blah. Then on the other hand, you have utter idiots like Lori Penny who are simply coming out with the stuff that she does because she knows that the groups she is supporting that are pro-trans, pro-sex work, and pro-other anti-woman nonsense are run by very high-profile, powerful libertarian men. We know that she is doing it for a career move. This is a quote from Lori Penny and she's a Bolshevik, by the way. She said, political lesbians are really crucial because we were the ones that first said that women should be able to determine their own sexuality. We were the ones that said that all women can be lesbians and that heterosexuality is compulsory under a system of male supremacy. We were the ones that said that until women had a free choice that we had to speak about heterosexuality as imposed upon us rather than freely chosen. So I think political lesbian has a crucial role because it tells women that sexuality is political under a system of male supremacy. This is all communist.
I like that. I love that label, political lesbian.
So radical feminism saw sexuality under patriarchy as massively problematic because it benefited men and it disadvantaged women. There's some more quotes.
Well, the fallacy of her opening premise there that men have power. It's a fallacy nowadays. Men really don't. Have you really gone out into the workforce and looked to see how little power men have anymore? If you look at a woman the wrong way, you're sent to human resources nowadays. You have the power. No, they have the power, and it goes into government too. There's not a lot of women in government, but those that are have what's the word I'm looking for?
Unquestioned?
No. The power they have, it's not unquestioned. It's
absolute?
It's not commensurate with their position. In other words, a few of them have more power than a lot of men.
Okay, let's call it what it is. What's going on right now?
Socialism, communism.
It's communism. I mean, in order to take down a country like the United States, you have to make the men irrelevant.
Yep.
You have to. And that's what they did in the Soviet Union. The men became a bunch of drunks. They lost all respect in women's eyes, and women didn't realize they were being used as tools themselves. They looked to the government for their support, for their food, for their money, and so forth. And the man was totally worthless. He was sent to the gulag. He was sent to the insane asylums. You name it. But this is a replay. This is a replay, and that's the future of the one world government is a form of communism. Mm-hmm. And way to do that is to marginalize the males and give at least give the females the impression that they have power, which they really don't. They think they do, but they really don't. What they're doing is they're just basically grinding the males into the ground. Mm-hmm. Listen to this one. She says, I think heterosexuality cannot come naturally to many women. I think that widespread heterosexuality among women is a highly artificial product of the patriarchy. I think that most women have to be coerced into heterosexuality. And she says, but the hatred of women is a source of sexual pleasure for men in its own right. Intercourse appears to be the expression of that contempt in pure form, in the form of a sexed hierarchy. It requires no passion or heart because it is power without invention, articulating the arrogance of those who do this. She uses the F word. Intercourse is a pure, sterile form expression of men's contempt for women. Go ask the average woman what she thinks of that, as she's swooning.
The thing is, this woman and people like her had to actually sit down and come up with this stuff. They had to think it out.
It's all a smokescreen for Marxism. And she says this, the next sentence, she says, sexuality is to feminism what work is to Marxism, that which is most one's own, yet most taken away.
But not only did they have to think it out, they had to internalize it into their heart. They had to believe it in their heart. See,
when the world's laughing, people are going to say, "Oh, lighten up, Kevin. This woman's just a quack." No, she's not. This is what's going on. This is what's being taught in your universities. These people have a plan, and as absurd as it looks, don't look at what she's saying because that's all smoke. The end goal is the result. The end goal is the marginalization of the male, so as to take control, because women are far more controllable than men. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be. They'll be easier herded. Be easier to have the herd mentality with women than it is going to be with men. There's always going to be a bunch of guys that get together and say, you know what, F you. Mm-hmm. And that's what they got to get out. Again, you can't have communism until you beat the men down.
Nope. And I mean, it's just I've always said there are two things in the last 25 years when it comes to this type of stuff with women that open the door for this to happen. Two events. Number one, the Clarence Thomas hearings with Anita Hill.
Oh, they're coming out with a new movie about her, Anita Hill,
and
making her into a hero.
The Murphy Brown thing, with being purposely planning on being a single mom.
Remember, always tie radical feminism with communism, because they're Marxists, and also tie a lot of the civil unrest you're seeing right now, like in Ferguson. The Communist Party USA was big time involved with
You're always going to find communists in it, and they'll use anything. They use those two events.
If communists didn't have subversion, they would have nothing, because if they really told you what their goal was, you would either shoot them or you would run like hell.
They do it incrementally, just like a frog in a pot of boiling water.
And remember, you're laughing. You're laughing at this woman because you think she's so absurdly funny. No, not really, because there's an ulterior motive behind it.
What did I say this morning? I said always listen to what leftists have to say, because they always broadcast what they're going to do. They always say what they're going to do, and they do it without fail. Obama's a good example. What was his big thing before he was elected? We're only 2 days away from fundamentally changing America. The fundamental change of America. Well, he's done that. If you don't believe it, folks, take your head out of the sand.
And again, I know you all think I dwell on communism a lot because it's the approved method of control for the New World Order. They tell you that.
Yep. Well, that's it for this show. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope our time away didn't dull our resolve or our ability to put on an interesting show or discussion. Anyway, we will be back here next week. We'll see you then.
Go Cards.
Bye-bye. Yeah, football season tomorrow, guys. Go Big Red. Bye-bye.
The Red Sea.